Hey, what's going on? It's Darius Foroux, and welcome to a new episode of the Darius Foroux Show. And on this episode, I'm going to share with you how I journal as a spiritual exercise. So thanks for checking out the latest episode. How are you? This is something that I often ask on my podcast, but since I started recording these episodes in video as well, I stopped asking, how are you? And I don't know why that is, but here it is again. How are you? How's it going? You can check out this show in audio on a podcast, but also right here on video. And whatever you prefer, you can consume it. But I always wonder, like, hey, how's it going? And one of my listeners at the time emailed me and said, hey, why are you asking, how are you? It's not that I can talk back or anything, but later on, he emailed me again. He was like, actually, I really like it because as I'm watching or at the time listening, as I'm listening to your episode, it gives me a second to think about how I am doing. Like, just stop for a second and say, hey, how am I doing? And often the answer is good. Most of the time, things are going well, but often we don't stand still for a second and think about, hey, I'm actually doing well. And that's something we can be grateful for. But let's get back to the episode. Let's get back to the topic that we're going to talk about today, and that is journaling as a spiritual exercise. Now, I've been journaling ever since I was like 16 or 17. So I have a lot of experience with journaling. And for the past 4 years, I've been journaling every single day. And a lot of people ask me, how do you journal? What's your practice? Do you have some tips for me? I once wrote an article about journaling in general, and I will link that below if you want to check that out. But in this episode, we will specifically talk about journaling as a spiritual exercise. And when I talk about a spiritual exercise, I'm talking about practicing philosophy. So most of us have a philosophy for life. Even if you don't have a philosophy, that is your philosophy, right? But we struggle with living the philosophy because that is what it's all about. And when I talk about philosophy, I'm not only talking about philosophy as in Stoicism or existentialism. I also talk about religion or any kind of movement that has practices that you can use as a way of life. So that's what we will focus on this episode. And the reason I think this is really important is because most of us, we forget our principles and the way that we want to live throughout life, because life is difficult and it's hectic, and often as we go through life, we forget the things that we want to do. And that's why I think writing or journaling, daily journaling, is the perfect tool to practice your ideology or your philosophy, the way that you want to live, the way that you want to conduct yourself in the world. Now, in mindfulness and Buddhism, what the tool that they use to practice is meditation. Now, not everybody likes meditation. Now, I have experimented with meditation as well. I do like it, but I prefer journaling as a spiritual exercise. And that is because I compare journaling to working out. It's something that you have to do almost every single day or as often as you can to repeat the basics and improve your strength. So as you go to the gym, you often perform the same movements. And as you are writing or journaling as a spiritual exercise, you're also repeating the same ideas and dogmas of your philosophy to ingrain them in your brain. So that is the goal of journaling as a spiritual exercise. And I recommend everybody to do it because it will help you to improve your focus. You will be more calm in life. You will have more purpose, more clarity, all those things. So how do you get started? Now, the first thing that I recommend is to pick a philosophy that you identify with the most. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the one that you grew up with, but explore the different types of philosophies that exist and religions, or whatever you prefer, and look into them and pick one that you identify with. And then the second step is to find one or two books that do a good job at summarizing the principles, or in terms of like aphorisms or practical sentences, or some kind of reminders what the philosophy is all about. And I really recommend Marcus Aurelius' Meditations to everybody who prefers Stoicism. And this is a book that Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself as a spiritual exercise. And this is where I actually got the idea from as well. I read the book called Inner Citadel by Pierre Hadot, who made an analysis of Marcus Aurelius' meditations. And what he found out was that not only did Marcus Aurelius write the things in this book for himself, he used it as a spiritual practice of improving his philosophy and making sure that he is living his philosophy, because everybody can read a philosophy book or some kind of spiritual book, but if we only read it once, the ideas will go away and we won't live them. So when you start journaling as a spiritual practice, you will start living the ideas that you relate to. And another book that you can check out is Think Straight, that I wrote myself, which is about pragmatism, the philosophy that William James started. And it's a very practical philosophy, and it works for me as well. So you don't necessarily have to pick only one philosophy. You can combine one or two things that are closely related, like Stoicism and pragmatism. But what you want to do is find a book and get the ideas that philosophy communicates in a simple way. You don't want to get like a scientific textbook, or get Michel de Montaigne, his essays, because that guy can ramble for hours and hours. Still great ideas, but I prefer more practical reading. And the reason you want to have a practical book is because you want to read it every single day. You don't necessarily have to read the whole book. Meditations is not a very small book. There are a lot of ideas in the book. So you want to grab the book every single day and just open it up and read a couple passages. Like I'm recording this right now, right? I'll open it up and I'll just pick out something that's small, completely random. If you're watching this, you can see me just going through it. Let's see, here it goes. Book 5, point number 24. Remember, matter, how tiny your share of it. Time, how brief and fleeting your allotment of it. Fate, how small a role you play in it. So by this meditation, or this spiritual exercise, you can see Marcus emphasizing the importance of time and matter and fate, and putting everything into perspective. As I'm reading this, I've read it countless of times. You can see that Marcus puts things in perspective all the time, that we are only a part of humanity, a small part of planet Earth. And if we look at time, we're only a small part of that as well. By putting things into practice, we become more at ease and more calm the way that we live our life. So I just did a little spiritual exercise for you right here. So the things that I talked about just now are the things that I also write in my journal, a small moleskin journal. I prefer these things because they're good quality, and I really enjoy the practice of sitting down, reading a couple passages, and then reformulating the things, the ideas, in my own words. I don't write things over word for word. I don't copy those things. I reformulate them in my own words. And in the beginning, that can be a little bit difficult, but if you stick with it, if you continue reformulating ideas, you will get better at it. And what you will find is that you will also get better at writing in general, because that is a skill that we can all rely on in our career as well. But that's not even the main purpose of this strategy. The main purpose of writing and journaling as a spiritual exercise is to get more clarity in your life, affirm the things that you believe in, and make sure that you stay on the path. And that is one thing that you see in a lot of personal development, is how can we stay on the path? And I found that journaling is probably the most powerful tool that you can use. Next to meditation, if that's your thing. Meditation is also great, but if that's not your thing, journaling is great as well. And also remember that these things go hand in hand as well. You can do both. It's not one or the other. And then finally, remember that you are writing for yourself. You don't have to impress anybody. You don't have to, sound very smart or intellectual or anything. This is something that is for your own use, and you are doing this to improve yourself, get more clarity, all those things that we talked about. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as a final thing, I have a question for you. Is this something that you believe in? Is this something that you are either doing, because I'm really curious to hear that, or is this something that you want to pick up? Is it something that you want to start doing? And if you started in the past, why did you quit? All those things. I'm really curious about hearing your thoughts. So feel free to post them in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this, feel free to respond to my newsletter. If you subscribe, reply, and just let me know your thoughts. So until next episode, like always, take care.